In 2022, William Ruto branded the election as dynasty, as hustler versus dynasty. Hustler versus dynasty. The have-nots against the haves. Very dangerous, but he did. But you can see he's unable to fulfill his promise. He has no money, and now he wants to become a dynasty. What is the next election about? What is the next election? Whether we have it this year, because I don't believe in all consciousness that this man is going to survive his term. What is the next election about? We are talking one common thread. Whether one has money, whether one doesn't have money, one common thread. We have an economic challenge in this nation, and it affects every single one of us. It is hurting every single one of us. There's no exception to this. We must activate the political questions of this illegitimate regime, this delinquent regime that is continually breaking law. We must. You cannot tell us that you can bring to account a member of parliament and recall, and you cannot recall a president and his government. We can. And in the next few weeks, you'll be hearing of that plan too. Our big problem here, and the last time we restructured was under Moi, is that under Moi we had one major pool of debt, which was called the Paris Club debt. That is the bilaterals with IMF and World Bank. One pool of debt. Today, we have 4 huge pools of debt. The Paris Club, the bilaterals and IMF are one. You have Chinese debt. You have what is called the London Club debt, which is where you have the syndicated loans and the Eurobonds, this private money. You imagine Eurobonds are now at almost 11%. And then you have got our domestic debt. You have 4 pools. How do you put them together to negotiate? The only way you can restructure this is by saying you are defaulting all of it. And the default of it all is very painful. You imagine 5.4 trillion is our domestic banks that have put this money in government bonds and bills, and we do not know what it has gone for. It's been a Ponzi scheme of eating. Those banks, that is our money. If you say you're defaulting on that, they will close tomorrow. So the question is, what do we do with that? How do we deal with that problem? Right? How do you deal with the defaulting on the foreign debt? Now, if you go the default way, which other countries have gone, it's very, very costly to each and every one of us. The first thing is that you have high inflation. Nobody wants your currency because it's not backed by the promise of it. So people will start running to the dollar. You have a currency exchange rate here going to crazy figures. Imagine if the dollar was at 300 plus. You can imagine the cost of living here. Your banks close. You have no access to systems and functions that the banking sector so give and are so embedded in our lives. We are all very electronic, right? The formula that's brought out by IMF is punitive. It talks about everyone now contributing. In Ghana, for example, they said that 30% of your money in the banks, in your M-Pesas, in anything must be forfeited. In your bonds or bills, if you had invested, must be forfeited. The pain is phenomenal, and coming out of it takes a long time. Long time. You've had Greece that went through bank closure for something like 8 years. You have Lebanon, which closed in 2019. Banks are still closed. They don't even have a government. They don't have a prime minister because of this issue. Our issue is like that. And here I can tell you, ours, fortunately, the good thing is that most of it is not legitimate. It's not legitimate. So we have an easy out. It's the courage of a leader to remove it. And a population and a country that supports that leader to do it. And that's where the next mandate must be about that. Must be about dealing with economic issue and our pain. And we must understand our pain. That's why we come on these forums. That's why we've been trying to educate people for over 2 years on something we have extensively studied. So we are going to continue this path to make sure that people understand that this is the issue. This is our economic issue. This is the fraud that has been done to us, and we must deal with it. And we deal with it by cutting it off. And once we cut it off, right, we shall breathe. What is the promise thereafter? That is the key thing. Every election has a question. Every election. in the multi-party elections that were there during the Moi period, and it's important to understand the first presidential election we ever had was in 1992. The election was to remove Moi. Remove Moi. He was eventually removed 10 years later in 2002, right? Because he was extending himself through what we believed was a proxy called Uhuru Kenyatta at the time. And people went the Kibaki way. And Kibaki gave us a breath of fresh air politically. He gave us a breath of fresh air economically. The man was about the empowerment of the human being. That's why free primary education was such a big thing to him, right? The next election in 2007 was an anti-Kikuyu election. It was 41 against 1. And you can see the chaos it caused. 1,400 lives. Kenyan lives we lost. The next election after that, 2013, of which I participated, was primarily about ICC. That is what the issue was. These so-called victims of ICC were being downtrodden by people said by Raila Odinga. Raila tried to make it about devolution. It did not work. It became about ICC. I remember that campaign very well. We threw in things like digital analog to entice the youth to participate because we were saying there's a new generation in power. In 2017, I participated heavily again, this time on the Raila side. We branded the Ruto regime as thieves. Nasa Hawa. That is what it was about. Because they were stealing. Those 4 years were theft. We were advertising it because they were stealing. And sure enough, the Supreme Court ended up even saying they stole the election and nullified it. So we cemented that. In 2022, William Ruto branded the election as dynasty, as hustler versus dynasty. Hustler versus dynasty. The have-nots against the haves. Very dangerous, but he did. But you can see, he's unable to fulfill his promise. He has no money, and now he wants to become a dynasty. What is the next election about? What is the next election? Whether we have it this year, because I don't believe in all consciousness that this man is going to survive his term. What is the next election about? We are talking one common thread. Whether one has money, whether one doesn't have money, one common thread. We have an economic challenge in this nation, and it affects every single one of us. It is hurting every single one of us. There's no exception to this, apart from those who may be in office who are looting. But I can tell you the nightmare of what they are doing is also there with them because they are dealing with problems every single day. It's like the treasury has an auctioneer at the door every day. That's what they're dealing with. We must brand the next election the economic emancipation of Kenyans. And what does that mean? Let everybody put their template. What does it mean? Let people talk economy, not tribe, not sijui nini, not sijui nonsense. You come here with an agenda on the economy and we start appending ideology, because that's where now we'll have discussions on where we are as a country, what we should be doing, where we should be going, and the populace can decide which is the direction they want. It's the economy. It's James Carville who said, who was a big campaigner of Clinton, it's the economy, stupid, it's the economy. That is what we should be discussing every day and not be sidetracked into funny tribal things that William Ruto would like to perpetuate. Asanteni sana. I hope I've answered most of your questions.